Hello, everybody. It is Mr. Odom, and I'm going to cover section 13.2, slope of a line. Here's our quote for this lesson. Always remember that you are absolutely unique, just like everyone else. So I'm going to pause for some reflection time, and then we'll come back and get started. Okay, so let's get started with this lesson. This won't take very long. We have our Common Core standards, which tell us that being able, yes, the slope is the same between, yes, this is the Common Core standard that covers slope. So, what do you need to know, understand, and be able to do? You're going to need to know what slope is, what the terms rise and run mean when we're talking about slope. And you need to be able to find slopes of lines by using 2 points. You don't need 3, you just need 2. And how to find slopes of lines if you have a table. Okay, so let's do it. Your tools, always need your pencil, eraser, composition book to take notes, and then the stuff in red, which we talked about in a previous video. Tools to help you be successful in the virtual learning world. I just made that up. Anyway, so important stuff for your composition book, right? This is important stuff. You can screenshot this or, pause the video, screenshot, or I don't know, copy it all down. Some students draw it in their composition books. This is a very important topic, slope, which we use little m to represent slope of a line. It is a ratio. Remember, a ratio is a comparison of two quantities using division of the change in y. And we call the change in y is called the rise. And so the rise is the numerator. So we're comparing the rise to the change in x, which we call the run. Okay, and this is between any 2 points on a line. You can pick the points. So if you're given a table of coordinates, you pick 2 of them, and it doesn't matter which 2 you pick. It doesn't matter. And you can calculate the slope of that line that goes through those 2 points. So here's the formula. Rise over run. You'll see that a lot. It is the change in y. How does y change from one point to another? Divided by how does x change from one point to another. And so here's a really good, I like this drawing right here, a very good drawing of what we mean by run and what we mean by rise when we're talking about slope. Let's talk about positive and negative slopes. Okay, so positive slopes, let me get a pen color here. Positive slope, notice that the line rises from the left to the right. Okay, it rises from the left to the right. If I pick a point here, whoops, I can't draw it. There you go. And I pick a point here, think about it. The change in x, when I go from this point to that point, and then the change in y when I go from this point to this point, you're going to end up with a positive value. But here, negative slope, so now we're going to look at lines that fall from left to right. And when a line falls from left to right, the change in y divided by the change in x will be a negative number. And we'll practice this in a moment. So here's kind of a summary. These are good things to remember. We talked about positive slope already, right? We talked about what that means. Check. We talked about negative slope. The line falls from left to right. Check. A slope of 0. So think about the formula. Slope equals y sub 2. We say y sub 2, that's a small 2, minus y sub 1 divided by x sub 2 minus x sub 1. A slope of 0 means that the numerator is 0. Okay, so y2 minus y1 is 0. And think about this on a horizontal line. Y is the same. So it doesn't matter if I'm at this point or at this point, the y coordinate is the same. So you'll get 0 in the numerator divided by whatever the change in x is. When we're talking about undefined slope, that means if I look at this formula again, y sub 2 minus y sub 1 divided by x sub 2 minus x sub 1, that means that my denominator is 0. And we learned earlier in the year that whenever I'm dividing by 0, that this means that that value is undefined. Okay, and that applies to our vertical lines. And if I think about it, when I look at points on a vertical line, so here's vertical line, here's 2 points, the value of x is the same. So I would have the same number in the denominator, and I would end up with 0. Okay, so just think about how lines, positive slope, negative slope, you can kind of look at a line before you even calculate the slope and determine if the slope is going to be positive or negative, just by how it looks. All right, next. So let's describe the slope. So for the first problem, for A, this slope, the line rises from left to right, so it is positive. This slope here is positive slope, so I'm using the plus sign to represent positive. And then we can calculate it by using the formula y sub 2 minus y sub 1, and this is the slope equals this, x sub 2 minus x sub 1. What I like to do is I like to label my points so that way I don't get them confused. I don't pick this negative 3 as my x sub 2 and then the 4 as my x or as my y sub 1. I keep the sub 1s together and the sub 2s together. And it doesn't matter which way you do it. You could have said this point, 3 comma 4 could have been x sub 2, y sub 2. You will still get the same answer when you calculate the slope. So let's go ahead and calculate it. Y sub 2, I get negative 1 minus y sub 1, which is 4. And then I have x sub 2, which is negative 3 minus x sub 1, which is 3. So my slope equals negative 5 over negative, whoops, I forgot to get my negative there, sorry. So that should be negative 6, or the negative divided by negative is positive. So there's my slope. What does this mean? It means my rise, remember the rise, is the numerator. That's the change in y. And my run is 6. Notice that that is the change in x. So rise over run, 5 over 6. So let's look at this next one. So for B, and for this one, I'll label this one x sub 2, y sub 2, just to show you that it doesn't matter. And that's x sub 1 and y sub 1. And this slope, this line is falling from left to right. So this slope is negative. Okay, so this slope is negative. So I use a negative sign. Let's calculate it. M equals y sub 2 minus y sub 1 divided by x sub 2 minus x sub 1. My y sub 2 is 1. I'm subtracting. So this was y sub 1. My y sub 1 is negative 2. So I got to put 1 minus negative 2. It's always subtracting whatever the value is. That value, that y value or x value could be negative. All right. So 1 y sub 2 minus y sub 1 divided by x sub 2, which is negative 1 minus 1. So my slope equals, well, 1 minus negative 2, that's just 3. Negative 1 minus 1 is negative 2. So my slope is negative 3 halves. All right. And notice they have my run as the positive number and my rise as the negative number. Remember that negative sign can move. It can be in the numerator, it can be in the denominator, or it can be out front. These are all equal. Okay, so these all represent the slope. Okay, here we go. Next one. So we need to find the slope of this line. And so I work this one out. I label my points x sub 1 and y sub 1 and x sub 2 and y sub 2. And notice this is a vertical line. So we should expect that the slope would be undefined. So let's go calculate it. I put the numbers in. I have y sub 2 minus y sub 1, x sub 2 minus x sub 1. Notice I have the same number in the denominator, and I end up with 0. So this vertical line, we already know because it's a vertical line, the slope is undefined. Right, and the last problem, we go to this view. The points in the table lie on a line. And one of the things we can do is we can pick whatever points we want to use. So typically we'll just pick the first two, but you don't have to. You could have picked the first one and the last one, the first one and the third one, the second and third, whatever. But we'll just pick the first two. All right. And then what are we going to do? We want to find the slope. So we just picked our points. And you see we use the points 1, 8, and 4, 6. We calculate our slope. We put the formula down. We put the numbers in there. 6 minus 8 over 4 minus 1. And we get our slope, which is negative 2/3. All right, so there you go. And we could check that by plotting all those points on a graph, which you see here. We see the run is 3, the rise is negative 2. Run 3, rise negative 2. Okay, so there you go. We can find the slope if we're given points that are listed in a table. If we're given these coordinate points listed in a table, we can calculate slope. So I think that's all I have. Do you have any questions for me? If you do, the video is going to pause now. All right, we're back. Hopefully you took some good notes. So, yep, this is Mr. Odom, and you know what I am. You know what I am. Have a good day.